Cali X Boxing 2.0. I am here. Welcome back to the channel. Fresh week. And this is a big one. This is fight week. And this is fight week of the biggest fight of the year. Maybe not as far as hardcore fans, but if you include casuals, if you include everyone involved, casuals plus hardcore boxing fans, this is the fight of the year up until this point. It's going to bring in a casual audience. It's Canelo. And the casual fans know Golvkin because Golvkin put on knockout after knockout performance. And then he was introduced to an even bigger market when he fought Canelo not once, but twice. And they're about to do it a third time. And this is unfinished business. And don't believe anybody who tells you otherwise. This is unfinished business. This needed to be done. It needed to be circled back to at some point. I'm not saying it needed to be done immediately after the second fight, but it needed to be circled back to because this is unfinished business. We're going to address this week. There's going to be a lot of gratefulness. There's going to be a lot of talk about gratefulness for Canelo, for Golvkin, fighters who have entertained, fighters who have given us what we deserve as fight fans. And it may not have always been at the time we wanted it, but they've given us what we wanted as fight fans. And I'm going to be talking about that. We'll circle back to that because a lot of talking now. We're going to talk action versus words. Action versus words. Once again, action versus words. We're seeing Eubank Jr. right now and Eubank Sr. out in the news. And we're going to talk about that off the jump. But too many words. Words, Twitter spats, negotiations, posturing, constant posturing. These dudes right here, Canelo and Golvkin, at the end of the day, they're about their business. They're about getting in the ring and delivering. They're about action. They're about entertainment. And the reason I love this card on Saturday night and the reason I'm going out to Vegas for this card is because action fights. At the same time, great technical ability from all fighters involved, but action fights, these guys deliver. They deliver. Y'all make sure to hit that like button as y'all come in and leave a comment so I know who's in the building. My guy, Chicano Prophet. And we're going to be talking a lot about Canelo versus Golvkin, Golvkin's chances. I'll be talking about betting odds this week. We'll be talking about, me and D-Style also, what would the boxing landscape look like currently if Canelo never existed? Just envision a world in the boxing world right now, the boxing realm, without Canelo there, without the cash cow there. What would boxing look like? And once again, it goes back to gratefulness. Even if you don't like these fighters, even if you're a hardcore Canelo fan, even if you're a hardcore Golvkin fan, you should still, I understand that the two fan bases get on each other's nerves, but you have to respect the fighters. And even the people who aren't hardcore fans of either fighter and hate both fighters, you have to respect the fighters. And if you don't respect the fighters who are active, who are giving you entertaining fights, who in more cases than not giving us the fights that we want, then guess what you're going to get less of? You're going to get less of that. You're going to get less entertaining matchups. You're going to get less activity. You're going to get less fights that need to be delivered. Not just on paper, not just mythical matchups, because dudes on here and dudes on Twitter love talking mythical matchups. Oh, of course this fighter will beat that fighter. Of course, fight then, let's find out. No, well, we can't do that because the politics of the sport. No. Fight. Let's find out. And that's how we find out is these guys get in the ring. Action over words. Manny Moda, appreciate you coming through. And if you're listening in archives, as most of you will be, leave a comment below. Appreciate all the comments and the likes that y'all have been giving me. Archive views have been great. Appreciate the love over on Twitter. And we're going to be talking a lot about this fight and this card this week. Don't care for Benn versus Eubank Jr. That fight does nothing for either fighter or the sport. Eubank has fights at 160. Benn should be pushing for Thurman fight or a recognized name at 147. And initially, I agree with that. And then the buzz of this fight, I saw the buzz of this fight coming from over the UK. And I'm like, you know what? I get it now. Bad blood between the families. It's really royal families in the boxing world across overseas. I get it now. I get it now. But then we're back to this. And more on that in a minute. Anna Lee, appreciate you coming through. As always, my guy Ness Mendoza, appreciate you. Appreciate y'all coming through. First, before we get into Canelo Golvkin and before we get into Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn, if the fight's happening, if it's not happening, this card being canceled overseas this past weekend, I just, as D-Style said when we talked about it Thursday night, I can't relate. I can't relate to a whole fight card being canceled. This is a global event. You have people coming from different parts of the world to cover the fight, to participate in the card, and then you cancel it over. And I get it, man. I understand. I'm an American. I don't understand the culture over there. I get all that stuff, and I don't want to talk about this too much. But I'm just saying, like, I get that people are upset about the Queen passing away. I'm empathetic to all of that. What I'm saying is a lot of people invested a lot into this card that was supposed to happen on this past Saturday night over in the UK. People are investing a lot. And a lot of the people who are investing a lot don't have much money, if we're being honest. These fighters depended on that purse all the way down the card. A lot of people went over there on their own dime to cover the card. A lot of fans traveled over there to watch that card. And a lot of those people, the money that they invested is not going to come back. That's a loss for that card not going through. And it's just a bad look. Just looking at it as maybe an ignorant American, and I get that. It's not a good look for a fight to be canceled over royalty and the common man being punished for that by the fight card not going through. I know everybody's being politically correct now and saying, yeah, I understand, we couldn't go through with the card, but I just think you should have went through with the card. I'm going to leave it at that. And now you got to, so much is invested in boxing to get a card made, especially these days. And for you to cancel the whole card, upend it, and then we got to do the whole thing over a month from now. Just thought it was a bad look. Thought it was a bad look for the common man to be punished a bit for royalty. But it is what it is. Let's move past that. I just wanted to get my thoughts out there on that so people knew. Saints Falcons was crazy. Go Saints. Who dat? I hear Spence date locked for November 19th with or without Bud. If this fight does not get made, I think it's time to point the finger at Bud. I would disagree with that. It's always PBC said this guy's across the street. They've said it for 4 years. This guy's across the street. If he comes on this side of the street, the fight can get made. He's been a promotional free agent for 295 days, and the PBC hasn't been able to deliver that fight date yet. They haven't been able to deliver this fight on paper yet, and that is a disgrace. And hopefully they get it done next week, because that window is getting shorter. It's getting shorter. Now, as far as Chris Eubank Jr. Versus Conor Benn, you agreed to the weight. And we're about to talk about two dudes in Canelo and Golvkin who I said are about the action. Not words, action. They're about the action. It may not always be on time, but they give us the fights that we want. They're about the action. They're about the entertainment value. So Chris Eubank Jr. says, you know what? I'm going to fight at a catch weight, 157 pounds, rehydration clause, agrees to everything. Yes, there's middleweights that I can fight out there. I'm not going to fight the middleweights. I'm going to fight this welterweight at a catch weight. Everybody was in agreement. 157, rehydration clause. Everybody agrees. This dude goes out there at fights. He's carrying around KFC bucket of chicken, saying, oh, look how funny. I can make this weight easy. Look how funny I am. Yeah. You think I'm going to suffer with the weight? No. This is going to be easy. And now, even after all the trash talk, we saw the trash talk this past weekend. Eubank Jr. is out there saying, I only have to abstain from sex for 2 weeks for you. Usually I do it for 8 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. For you, I'll only abstain from sex for 2 weeks because that's how little I care about you. And then 2 days later, his dad comes out and says, we're not doing the fight because I can't put my son in danger of going all the way down to 157 and rehydrating only a certain amount of weight. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. And this is what I'm talking about, the current boxing world. We're lucky if these dudes fight twice a year. Once a year is the new norm. Negotiating in public is the new norm. Twitter thumbs is the new norm. And that's why I tell you to appreciate fighters who actually get in the ring and fight top competition and give you entertaining fights. We'll talk more about that as this show goes on. Stop showing so much respect to dudes fighting once a year. Twitter thumbs, Twitter thumbs, Twitter thumbs, constant negotiations, constant posturing. And now we get a dude, his dad goes out there, not even him, his dad goes out there and says, we're not doing the fight. I don't agree with the 157. Did you agree with it last month? Did you agree with it when y'all were negotiating? Did you agree with it when your son signed the paper and you came out and said, yeah, let's do the fight. Yeah, great, yeah. Now, all of a sudden, we can't do it. We can't do 157. So hopefully what we have here is more posturing, more negotiations, which I hate, but that's better than the fight being canceled. Hopefully this is Eubank Sr. going out on behalf of his son and saying, you know what, I don't like what's going on right now with conditioning. I don't like how we look, trying to cut this much weight. Let's go out there and try to get an extra pound or two. Let's try to go out there and say, hey, we'll give up a little money and fight at 158. Hey, we'll give up a little more and fight at 159. Hey, let us rehydrate up to 170. And Eubank and Conor Benn goes along with it, gets a little more money, and the fight goes on. Hopefully that's what we have here, because that's better than the alternative of the fight being canceled altogether. And I just sense my spidey senses are tingling, and they're telling me that this is posturing and negotiation out in the public, which that should have been done already, is my point. You already negotiated the fight. You already negotiated the weight. This is like Billy Joe Saunders coming out the night before the fight and saying, hey, I want a 24-foot ring against Canelo. Wait a second. What do you mean you want a 24-foot ring? What do you mean? In negotiations, you already agreed to something else, and you got $8 million, and now you want a bigger ring? And that's what these dudes do. That's what they do. And it screams insecurity to me. Eubank Jr. should have already had all of this dealt with. Eubank Sr., he should have had his word already. But instead, what this is likely is, let's get the fight signed. Let's get the fight signed. Let's get our money. Let's get our bag. Let's agree to this. And then, you know what? A couple weeks from now, let's say we don't like this. This may have been choreographed already. And this is the frustrating part about Eubank Jr. is he already pulled out of fights, pulled out of negotiations with Gennady Golvkin. He has a track record of doing this, and we always go back to track record. Conor Benn's agreed to everything. Conor Benn's ready for the fight. Conor Benn agreed to fight a bigger man. The bigger man agreed to fight at a catchweight. But what I fear and what I think is happening here is this has been planned. This has been planned from the Eubank family to say, you know what, a couple weeks from now, there's already too much money invested. There's too much invested in this fight for them to cancel. Let's come back a couple weeks from now. Let's make sure to secure our bag, sign this fight, whatever they want. But let's come back a couple weeks from now and threaten to pull out of the fight and try to get them up to 158, 159, higher rehydration clause. And there's going to be too much invested in this fight for them to cancel it now. They're already halfway through their training camp. We've already done promotional events. Let's try to get them up a couple pounds. And that's what I think is going on here. I don't think the fight's going to be canceled. That's just my instincts. Because it would look terrible, terrible if Eubank Jr. were to pull out of this fight, especially after the trash talking he did this past weekend, especially after him carrying around KFC bucket of chicken around at a fight. All the trash talking he's been doing, avoiding other middleweights, avoiding other top middleweights to go down and fight a welterweight, agreeing to the catchweight, and then saying later on, no. We can't do that because it's not safe. And then sending his father out to do that instead of him doing it. But until I hear from Eubank Jr., until I hear it from his mouth, I don't think this fight's going to be canceled. And it goes back to talking versus actual activity. Fighters who want to give us what we want and consistently deliver that, with some exceptions, and we'll talk about those exceptions, but they consistently give us what we want as fight fans. They're not posturing to the media. They're not negotiating on Twitter. They're actually fighting. And these guys right here, Eubank Jr., this is terrible. Terrible. It does not make sense. We can pay respect for a minute. The fight should have punched through. That's what I'm saying. Pushed through. They should have fought that fight over there. They should have fought that card. This is another crazy story making a joke out of boxing. Appreciate Bruce Gass. And Bruce Gass is an OG. Bruce Gass understands, and this is how people who have experienced, people who have real life experience can put things into proper perspective. And people who have been watching boxing over generations can put things into proper perspective. I've only been watching it over, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 generations. So I can put it in perspective, but I can't put it into perspective the way a Bruce Gass can, who's been following the sport for decades upon decades upon decades. And you talk to real OGs of boxing, they don't understand the way some of these fighters are moving, the way they're carrying themselves. And when you see something like this, when you see a fighter already agreed to everything, and then his dad goes out there on social media and says, no, we can't do this, it's not safe. It doesn't compute with people who have been following boxing for a long time. It doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. It's a new generation of fighter. And that's why we need to respect, give flowers, pay homage to fighters now who have a little bit of old school in them. Guys like Chocolatito, guys like Pacquiao, guys like Canelo, guys like Golvkin, guys who have that, guys like Timothy Bradley, guys who had or have some old school in them, who will take on anybody at any time and consistently give us the fights that we want. Eubank Sr. is a strange dude. Who is he to pull his son out of the fight? And I don't think this is Eubank Sr. just going out on his own. There has to be conversations going on behind the scenes. I would think, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe the two are estranged. And there's Eubank Sr. going out on his own, but he had to have had a conversation with Eubank Jr. at some point, I would think, before he goes out to the public and says, no, we're not doing this fight. I would think anyway. Senior, he should have let his son decide for it on his own. And I think his son is involved in this. Dad trainers are always doing the most. They are. Dad trainers are out of control. The thing is, holding up Benn, who could be fighting in his own weight class against step-up competition. And this is the other thing. This was the original reason I was against this fight, is I want to see welterweights fight welterweights, middleweights fight middleweight. These are two dumpster juice divisions in which the top guys are not fighting each other. Eubank Jr. is right there with Boo Boo Andre, Jamal Charlo, as guys not doing anything in the division. And these are sexy traditional divisions where guys are supposed to be doing things. They're supposed to be paying homage to the guys who came before them in the lineage, who held up these divisions and passed it on to them. And instead of that, it's the foolishness. It's the foolishness. I can't blame Golvkin for going up to 168, but he wasn't doing much at 160 in the past 4 years, to be honest. It's been a dumpster juice division. And Eubank Jr. holding up the division by fighting at a catchweight against a welterweight. Then the welterweight, Conor Benn, one of the 7. Conor Benn is one of 7 undefeated fighters in the top 10 at welterweight. And I've talked about this ad nauseum. There should never, ever, ever, you should never have 70% of a top 10 in the division be undefeated. Because that what that shows you is the top guys are not fighting each other in that division. The 2 top guys in the division haven't fought each other in 4 years. And it's still not signed. And it's still not signed. And blame PBC for that. So that sets the pace for the rest of the division. That locks up the rest of the division. And these other guys are saying, I want to be like those 2 guys at the top. They're not fighting tough competition either. And they're being told by fans, by fanagers, that they don't have to fight each other. They're both coming up. They should take it easy, take easier fights. Why fight each other right now? Why fight each other this early in your career? Why would you do that? That's what the fanagers are telling them. Why would Boots and Virgil fight each other? They're undefeated. They're on the way up. It's not time to do that fight yet. No, wait a second. Boots and Virgil are saying that they'll fight anybody. Take them by their word. Let them fight anybody. Let them fight each other. There's no reason that they can't. They'll brainwash you. This guy's with this promotional company. This guy's with that promotional company. No. This guy's undefeated. This guy's undefeated. They're both trajectory on the way out, so they can't fight each other. No. Fight each other. 7 of the top 10 guys in the division should never be undefeated simultaneously. That should never happen. That is an embarrassment to the sport of boxing. I watched Nick Diaz fight this past Saturday night against Tony Ferguson. Both guys have several losses, but guess what? The fans gave those guys their flowers. They headlined a main event on a UFC which sold out and did over $5 million live gate. I don't know how many pay-per-views it did, but live gate over $5 million. And they both got their flowers from the fans, and deservedly so, because both guys, even through several losses, gave those fans over the years several entertaining fights. And they fought top competition, and sometimes they failed, sometimes they were successful. And at the end of the day, they got their flowers from the fans. And Nick Diaz is going to be paid as a promotional free agent. But that's what we should be doing as boxing fans, instead of propping up undefeated fighters who don't fight anybody. Give flowers to the fighters who are worthy of the flowers, who went through the pain, who went through the fire, who went through the suffering. Give them their flowers. Instead of giving dudes avoiding the fire, avoiding the pain, instead of giving the dudes swerving through that and expecting the flowers on the other side, don't give them the flowers. Withhold it until they actually do something to deserve those flowers. Show respect to the fighter. Even if you don't like them, you don't have to like them. That's the thing. You don't have to like them to give them their props. Say, I respect this dude. I hate him, but I respect the hell out of him. I got to give him his flowers. I hated Kobe Bryant. I hate LeBron James. I hate Kevin Durant. I hate Stephen Curry, but I watch him. I'm like, got to give them their props. Got to give them their respect. I hated Karl Malone, John Stockton. Couldn't stand them. Could not stand them. Hated Magic Johnson. Could not stand them. Got to give them their flowers. And we've gotten away from that as boxing fans. I hate that dude. Hate him. He sucks. No, he doesn't suck. He doesn't suck. You can't go with that. You can't go with it. Gennady Golovkin sucks. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Canelo sucks. Canelo's done this. Nope. I had Canelo losing to this guy. Oh, you had him losing conveniently to every single one of those guys, right? Oh, you had him losing to Lara and Trout and both Golovkin fights. Oh, and the Danny Jacobs. Oh, you had Golovkin losing to Danny Jacobs and Dervinchenko. Oh, yeah, of course you had them losing all those fights, right? Yeah, okay. And you're unbiased, right? You had Canelo losing to Trout, Lara, both Golovkin fights. You had him being shut out by Dimitri Bivol, yet you're unbiased. Oh, okay. Nope, you're not unbiased. Nope, they don't fight. That is. So you think Team Eubank is essentially bluffing? I think so. It is part of a marketing. Selling the fight is bad. The thing is, they don't have to do this. I think this is Eubank Jr.'s team securing the bag in negotiations, saying they wouldn't have agreed to anything above 157 and above this rehydration clause. So let's secure this bag. Let's see how we do in training for a couple weeks. If it looks bad, let's go back, publicly say we're not doing the fight, threaten to cancel it, and they'll have to come back because we're too far into this. We're too far into this at this point. It would look terrible on everybody if this fight is canceled at this point, because this wasn't a fight that people were calling for. In the UK, it became a huge fight, a huge event, because once they put that feeler out there, it's like, oh, yeah, I love that fight. And then once they announce it, UK goes crazy. As an extension, we start going crazy over here, because even a person like me who wants to see the welterweight fight the welterweight and the middleweight fight the middleweight, it's still a lot of buzz. And it's still a fight you say, oh, it's a good fight. It's a good fight on paper. Now they're too far into it. Now they're too far into it. He left it open, and let's see what he does with that. But as far as Canelo versus Golvkin, let's get into this. They had to circle back to this fight. Had to. They had to. This was unfinished business. This was never solved. And there's a lot of false narratives out there, and I'm going to get into that. I'm going to touch on those today. Tomorrow we'll talk boxing lines. Wednesday we'll talk about what the boxing landscape would look like if Canelo Alvarez didn't even exist. And then Thursday we'll talk about official previews and predictions, and I'll have people on this channel throughout the week. But this fight had to happen. And I've never bought into the false narrative that this was settled business, that Canelo beat Golvkin in the second fight, therefore we don't need to visit a third fight, that the fights weren't that good to begin with. They were both good fights, but not great fights. I never bought into any of those narratives. Both entertaining fights, both close fights, not controversial. And that's another false narrative out there. Not controversial decisions. Debatable decisions, not controversial. There's a difference. Controversial is Pernell Whitaker versus Julio Cesar Chavez. That's controversial. That's a flat-out robbery. But what's not controversial is Golvkin versus Canelo 1 and 2. Those were debatable decisions that could have went either way, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to see a third fight. There was never a separation, in my opinion. These fighters never separated themselves from each other. Pacquiao Marquez, the first 3 fights, there was no separation through 36 rounds, and through 42 rounds, no separation until Marquez lands that big right hand against Pacquiao, and there's your separation. There it is. There's your separation. And remember, Pacquiao Marquez 1 and 2 happened within the same time as each other. It took a while for the third fight. The third fight was, oh, this is past its prime, right? This is past the due date. This is past the expiration date. Pacquiao's a different beast now. He's at a different weight. Marquez is above his natural weight now. Marquez is well past his prime. And what we get more of the same. We do it again the fourth fight, and we get Marquez knocking Pacquiao out. And we would have never, ever, ever dreamt of Marquez knocking Pacquiao out going into that third fight. Even going into the fourth fight, when Marquez proved that he still belonged in the ring with Pacquiao, even all those years later at a higher weight class, we would have never imagined Marquez knocking Pacquiao out. And that's why you fight the fights. And certain guys are made for each other. Certain guys are built for each other. The boxing gods create these guys for each other. And Canelo and Golvkin are 2 guys who are built for each other. In my opinion, these are 2 guys that if they fought 10 fights, we get a lot of the same. Eventually, we might get a knockout, but I don't think it's going to come in this fight. I don't think so. And we'll talk about that as the week goes on. But this is something they had to circle back to at some point. And some of the other false narratives out there is Golovkin's out there saying, oh, he's aging me out. That's why we got the fight 4 years later. Nonsense. Nonsense. It doesn't have to be. Canelo didn't have to fight Golvkin directly after the second fight. And Golvkin's fans, super fans, need to be honest about what's going on here. One of the reasons that Golvkin sort of lost some traction after the second Canelo fight is he became inactive and started to whine a little bit. And this is coming from a Golvkin fan. What did Golvkin give us over the years? From 2012 on, when he fought Proxka and he came to the United States in 2012. He fought 4 times in 2013, 3 times 2014, 3 times 2015, 2 times 2016, 2 times 2017, 2 times 2018. And he was fighting against the best opposition available to him, even when those big fights weren't available to him, when those big fights weren't coming to him. Sergio Martinez, Miguel Cotto, 2 lineal champions who did not fight Golvkin. But what did Golvkin do? He didn't sit back and whine. He went about his business. He fought the top competition available to him, And over the years, he's got wins against guys like Macklin, Gill, Murray, Lemieux, Danny Jacobs, fought Canelo twice, fought Derevyanchenko, fought Murata, and he fought Derevyanchenko and Murata in that span that I'm talking about. So that's where the mixed bag comes into play, and that's where you give him props, right? That's where you give him props. He's one of the few middleweights in recent history that is actually unified. He did that against Murata, and I think he looked better than people gave him credit for. I thought he won the Derevyanchenko fight, and he got credit for that. So he's done some good things in that span, but what he did not do is he did not stay active. He sat back and expected that third Canelo fight to fall in his lap instead of getting active, staying active, and forcing Canelo back into the ring with him. And that gave Canelo the excuse to, hey, we don't need to do this third fight. I won the second fight. We don't need to do that third fight. He's not even doing anything anyway. They gave Canelo the reason to not do the third fight. I say it all the time. When you build an organic fan base, the only thing that can detach you from that fan base, organic fan base, is you. That's it. I say it about Anthony Joshua now. I say it about Canelo now. There's a reason that Canelo and Anthony Joshua are still in big fights coming off of losses. There's a reason that Tyson Fury is trying to attach himself to Anthony Joshua. There's a reason that Deontay Wilder is talking about Anthony Joshua. It's because Anthony Joshua is still the cash cow of the heavyweight division and still the second biggest fighter in boxing universally behind Canelo Alvarez. And both of those fighters are coming off of losses. And there seems to be a lot of people out there who are confused by this. How can these guys coming off of losses still be the attraction that they are? And there's a reason that people are out there capping and lying that there's no buzz to the Canelo fight this week when there's going to be buzz. It's going to sell out. Believe me, I'm going out there. I wish there wasn't any buzz because I'd much rather not pay what I'm going to pay to go out there. So I wish these guys were telling the truth that there isn't any buzz, but there is. I wish people would just be able to keep it unbiased, call things how they are. But how things are the way things are the way they are because Canelo and Anthony Joshua are consistent in fighting top competition. They're consistent in trying to become the champion of their division, striving to that. And that's the reason that when they fail temporarily, they still succeed overall because they're not going to be detached from their fan base as long as they behave like Canelo Alvarez and Anthony Joshua. You're given a built-in fan base by having the attributes that Canelo had, having the attributes that Anthony Joshua has. Women love you. Men want to be you. But you have to consistently fight top competition in order to keep that and then grow that umbrella. And they've been able to do that. But the reason Gennady Golovkin has lost some traction over the past 4 years is because he got away from that. He got away from being Gennady Golovkin. He got away from being active, and if things don't happen for him, things don't materialize for him, if things don't fall in his lap, he's going to get it. That's how Gennady Golovkin was. And then the past couple of years, he got away from that, and that's why he's lost some of that organic fan base that he's trying to get back, and he can get back if he becomes undisputed at 168 by beating Canelo Alvarez. But if you look at Canelo's resume, if you look at Gennady Golovkin's resume, how we got here is one of the false narratives is Canelo was trying to age Gennady Golovkin. And look, I understand he dropped the WBC diamond belt. The fight took 22 months to materialize, but guess what? He fought him. He fought him. We have to keep things in the proper perspective. When we look out at the full resumes, these guys give us what we want. Even if it's not immediately, they give us what we want eventually. Miguel Cotto is one of my favorite fighters in modern boxing. He never gave me the Golvkin fight. Didn't do it. They asked him about Golvkin in the post-fight interview. He forgot English. That's my guy, Cotto. Didn't fight him. Sergio Martinez, there was a brief moment there where he could have gave us the Golvkin fight. We didn't get it. We didn't get it. Canelo, it took some time. It took some time. It took some pressure. He gave it to us. And the revisionist history is strong because I remember the first Golovkin-Canelo fight, and I remember Canelo being the underdog. And I remember going in and people saying Canelo can't survive with a natural middleweight who punches like this. It's not going to happen. He's not going to beat Golovkin. And it goes 12 rounds, and you're like, man, Canelo looked pretty good. I felt he lost the fight. He looked good, though. He competed. Going into the second fight, Golovkin was the favorite once again. And Canelo comes out and makes the proper adjustments, fights on the front foot more, wins the fight. Some people feel he lost. Some people say he won. But if we go back into revisionist history, the narrative going in was Canelo can't compete with Gennady Golovkin, a natural middleweight who can punch. That was the narrative going into that fight. The narrative going into the Austin Trout fight was Golden Boy did not want him to fight Austin Trout. Didn't want him to. They felt Austin Trout was all wrong for Canelo. Canelo said, give me the damn fight. Give me the fight. What are we doing here? What are we doing? We're fighters, right? This is boxing, right? My promoter is telling me that I can't beat Austin Trout. Essentially, that's what they're saying. Austin Trout, you shouldn't do that fight. You should go elsewhere. Canelo said, give me the fight. Give me the fight. Arislandi Lara is all wrong for you. He's all wrong for you. Give me the fight. Mayweather, it's too early. It's too early. The managers are telling him it's too early. Canelo said, give me the fight. Give me the fight. I want to fight him. We're boxers, right? This is boxing. We're fighters, right? Let's fight. If I lose the fight, I lose the fight. Who cares? Gennady Golovkin going into the Golovkin fight. Oh, you should stay away from that fight. Golovkin punches too hard. He's a natural middleweight. You need to go back down to 154. No, don't fight that monster. Don't fight. That's what the managers are telling him. It's all wrong for you. Fights the fights. He fights the fights. Whether you feel he's winning those fights or not, he fights the fights consistently. That's why we're here. That's why Canelo is the face of boxing. That's why if Canelo loses 3 straight fights, 4 straight fights, people are still calling him out, and he's still the face of boxing because he consistently gives it to us. He's consistently fighting multiple times. You know the only year that Canelo fought once in his career? He's been pro 17 years. Canelo's been pro since 2005. You know he's only fought once in 1 year? 1 calendar year he fought once. And that was the COVID year. Had it not been for COVID, Canelo, every single year of his 17-year pro career, he would have fought multiple times. He's not a part-time fighter. He's been busy. He's been building an organic fan base by giving us the top fights, by striving to be the best in his division that he's competed in. He's consistently given us that. Consistently tried to be the best at 154, tried to be the best at 160 by beating Gennady Golovkin, even though he was already the lineal champion. Because the buzz was Golovkin's the real champion at middleweight. Canelo fought him twice. And then at 168, he moves into 168, fights everybody with the belt, becomes undisputed at 168. Moves up to 175, says, I'll fight Dmitry Bivol, one of the top 2 guys in the division. He's consistently tried to be the best in the divisions he's competed in. And he's fought multiple times per year, every single year, despite the COVID year. That being the only exception. This is the blueprint to being a star in boxing. It's the blueprint. And fighters have proven that even if they don't speak the native language, even if they're coming from a different part of the world, if they follow this blueprint, they can become big. Gennady Golovkin has proven that. Comes over to America, barely speaks English, and they run a great marketing campaign for Gennady Golovkin. And Gennady Golovkin says, I'm going to fight consistently, and I'm going to fight against the best competition available to me until a big fight comes to me, and that was the Canelo fight 5 years later, after he comes to America for the Proxa fight. But what did Golovkin do? He stayed in people's faces. He knocked out fighter after fighter after fighter after fighter. 13 straight knockouts going into the Danny Jacobs fight. 13 straight stoppage victories. So he's staying in people's faces, fighting 3 times per year, fighting almost quarterly, and he's giving you highlight real KO after highlight real KO. And the revisionist history tells you all these guys are bums, but these are top 10 fighters he's fighting. Martin Murray, Macklin, Gill, Lemieux, Danny Jacobs. Danny Jacobs was seen as number 1 and number 2 in the division at the time. Wins a decision. Fights Canelo Alvarez, who was seen as 1 or 2 in the division at the time. Fights him twice. Both close decisions. Fights Derevyanchenko after that. Fights Murata. Unifies in the division at 40 years old. That's what Gennady Golovkin is doing. And that's what he's done in order to become attached to Canelo Alvarez, because once again, it's something that needed to be circled back to, because these guys are attached to each other forever, because there was no separation between the two guys. And that's why we still don't know who is better head to head. Canelo's going to go down as greater. Make no mistake about it. He's built up too much equity into this point. Fought through multiple weight classes, became undisputed, all that stuff. So even if Gennady Golovkin were to win this fight Saturday, Golovkin sort of on the back end of his career, Canelo Alvarez has plenty of years left. That's not going to take away from Canelo ending up to be the greater fighter out of the two, in my opinion. But these two guys are attached to each other forever. The boxing gods have made these two guys for each other. I'm pumped for this fight. It feels like fight week. And I woke up this morning and it felt like fight week. Any fan of boxing will absolutely be watching this fight. Hopefully you win a few bucks in the casino, because the trip setting you back for a few racks for sure. I kind of missed the Mexicans for Triple G. I guess they were fair weather fans. That's right. KFC for Eubank Jr. There is a buzz from the casuals. A couple of my classmates last week were talking about the Canelo fight, asking me if I'm going to watch it. Oh, his favorite fighter is Pitbull Cruz. I got Golovkin winning the 2 fights, and that's fair. It's fair. They were both debatable fights. They were both debatable. Not controversial. Neither one of them is controversial. And I'll say this. Power jabs always scores, right? Yeah, and Golovkin has the power jab. And we'll talk about that more throughout the week, too, because a lot was made about why Golovkin gives Canelo problems and who gives Canelo problems. And I've always felt like the lateral movement gives Canelo problems was always overdone. I've never felt like the lateral movement gives Canelo issues. What gives Canelo issues in fights is the jab, Bivol and Golovkin. When they had success, it was with the jab, and both of those guys are great jabbers. And throughout the week, we'll talk about why Golovkin is going to be competitive in this fight, and it's because of the jab. The jab, the jab, the jab. He can use it as a defensive mechanism and an offensive mechanism, and that hasn't gone away. And it's going to be a good fight, and it's going to be the most exciting fight out of 3, in my opinion. And by the way, Bam Rodriguez on the undercard. We got some bangers on this undercard. Love this card. All-action card. But as far as this fight right here and why it's important, it's because there hasn't been separation between the two guys up until this point. Debatable versus controversial. Both these fights were debatable. They were both debatable fights. Both debatable fights. And it also makes it important that Canelo is coming off of a loss, so that raises the bar a bit. You don't want to have 2 straight losses. Ask Anthony Joshua. And Anthony Joshua is still as big as ever. Canelo will still be as big as ever, but they don't want multiple straight losses on their resume. They don't. And Canelo does not want to lose to Golovkin, and Canelo superfans don't want to lose to the Golovkin superfans. And one thing I'll say, though, I dropped a video about 2 months ago directed towards the Canelo extreme fans, saying, don't let the Golovkin extreme fans get to you and make you think lesser of Golovkin, because you shouldn't be thinking lesser of Golovkin and saying lesser of Golovkin, because when you do that, you devalue Canelo's win in the second fight against Golvkin. But I have to direct that more towards the Golvkin super fans right now. Because I got to say, I wasn't around these parts, YTBC and Twitter boxing in 2017, 2018. So when the Canelo super fans talk about how nauseating the Golvkin super fans can be, I didn't really know what they were talking about. Now I get it. Now I get it, because the past couple of weeks has been ratcheted up, and the Golvkin super fans have been out of pocket. I have to say, they've been out of pocket. Oh, both fights were robbery. Oh, Canelo's been ducking Golvkin for 4 years. Oh, Canelo's not that good. Canelo's a drug cheat. Canelo's this. Canelo's that. Canelo's not that good. It's like, come on, man. Come on. Don't devalue Canelo and what he's achieved in his career, because you're devaluing Gennady Golovkin in the process, because Gennady Golovkin has went what and what with Canelo Alvarez through 24 rounds. So when you devalue Gennady Golovkin, when you devalue Canelo Alvarez, you're devaluing what Gennady Golovkin went through in those two fights. If Canelo Alvarez was this run-of-the-mill average dude, the Gennady Golovkin wouldn't have had to go 24 rounds with him up until this point, and he wouldn't need a third fight. Same thing in reverse. If Gennady Golovkin were an average run-of-the-mill middleweight, Canelo Alvarez wouldn't be circling back to this third fight. He wouldn't have went what and what with this guy for 24 rounds. They wouldn't be connected to each other. The Gennady Golovkin fans need to chill. The super fans, because I'm a fan. I'm a fan of both fighters. The super fans, the extremists, need to chill out with these narratives. They need to. They're devaluing their own fighter in the process, because if Canelo were all these things, Golovkin wouldn't need a third fight to try to clear things up. Golovkin wouldn't have had to beg on his hands and knees for 4 years for a third Canelo fight. And he's been begging. And Golovkin's out there today saying, oh, he's been aging me out. He hasn't fought me for 4 years for a reason. It's like, no, man. No. He didn't have to circle back to that third fight right away. He had other business. He wanted to move up to 168. He had other things he wanted to do. He already fought you twice. He was the only cash cow in the division who fought you, and he fought you twice. He gave you 24 rounds. And you could have made things easier for yourself if you stayed true to Gennady Golovkin. If you still acted like Gennady Golovkin 2019, 2020, 2021, besides the Derevyanchenko fight, you should have been more active, and you should have been cornering Canelo Alvarez. You should have been more active. You should have been fighting every 4 or 5 months, every 4 to 6 months fighting, until Canelo Alvarez said, I got to do it. The demand's there. We never finished business. He's out there still knocking guys out. We got to do it. But your inactivity gave him a reason to go elsewhere. It made it easier for him to go elsewhere. So let's not act like this is all on Canelo Alvarez, that we're getting this fight in 2022 instead of 2020, instead of 2021, instead of 2019, because it's not. It's on you as well. And the Gennady Golovkin fans need to chill out, because they've been getting out of pocket. The super fans I'm talking to, not the regular run-of-the-mill Canelo and Golovkin fans, but the super extreme Golovkin fans out there. Y'all need to chill out, because it's making you look foolish. Canelo needs a knockout. It would be epic for his career. And another part of this that I don't like with the Golovkin fans, super fans, the extremists, is it seems to me they're trying to set things up for when Golovkin loses the fight. I'm putting myself in their shoes. It's, oh, Golovkin's 40 years old. Canelo should win the fight. And look, that's true. But at the same time, it seems to me like they're trying to set their fighter up for after he falls, right? They're trying to move the goalpost a little bit. Oh, he aged us out 4 years. He initially ages out 2 years. All this stuff. No, man. Like, it's a fight. It's a fight. Your fighter wins or loses. We can put things in the proper perspective later. I get that. But it just seems to me like there's some insecurity out there with the with the Golvkin extremists, the Golvkin extreme fan base. It seems like they're positioning and posturing themselves for what happens if their fighter loses after this fight. Oh, he was just old. Oh, there's a reason Canelo was staying away from him for 4 years. He was waiting until Golvkin was 40 years old. None of that stuff's fair. Canelo needs a knockout. It would be epic. Canelo's loss to Bivol will be an excess baggage on his mind, said in my humble opinion, and possibly. We don't know. Possibly. Always a Triple G fan. Golvkin, past 6 years, he was the boogeyman in middleweight. Facts. And he was the boogeyman. And that's what I'm saying. Like, Golvkin was a legitimate boogeyman at middleweight, much like Kovalev was at light heavyweight. These guys were considered boogeymen, much like Soron Vise at 115. I talked about it before the Bam Rodriguez fight and after. What makes that win great for Bam Rodriguez is I don't want to hear Soron Vise is up there in age, all that stuff. Soron Vise won 23 out of his last 24 fights, most of them by knockout, almost all of them by knockout, and arguably won all 24. Just destroying guys. People at 115 didn't want to deal with that guy. And Bam says, give me the fight. Give it to me. Let's do the fight. And he stops him. He stops him. And I don't want to hear anything about Ronvise being up there in age. He stops him. Soron Vise at 115. Golvkin at 160 in his prime. Kovalev at 175. Either close or right past it. They were boogeymen. Andre Ward knocks Kovalev out in the second fight. It's a great victory. Canelo beating Golvkin in the second fight, whether you agree with the cards or not, beat him in the second fight. It's a great victory. It's a great victory. He beat the boogeyman in the division. Bam Rodriguez beating the boogeyman at 115. When you beat the boogeyman in your division, when you swerve out of the way to fight that guy and beat him in the division, it's a great victory. And Canelo beating Golvkin in the second fight is a great victory. In my opinion, it's the best victory of Canelo's career. And you don't devalue it by saying, oh, Golvkin ain't all that. Golvkin ain't all that. Golvkin was passive. No, it's a great victory. And both of those fights, in my opinion, were great fights. And I think the third one will be better than the other two because of the entertainment value it brings due to also the high stakes, right? Both guys trying to create their separation. Both guys knowing this is my last chance with this guy. Likely. It's my last chance with this guy. I got to create separation now. I'm tired of being attached to this guy. I'm tired of his fan base. I'm tired of being attached to the guy. That's what raises the stakes here. But also it's going to be more entertaining because of when Golvkin is up there in age, any fighter who's up there in age, 40 years old, you're well past your prime. And when they say that, that's fair. That's fair. But the reflexes diminish a little bit. But the last thing to go is the power. So Golvkin will still have the power, but the reflexes won't be there how they were 4 or 5 years ago. So it's going to make for a more entertaining fight. More excitement, more leather landing, and it's going to be a brawl. You're going to have some chess playing at times, but there's going to be a lot of phone booth fighting. And it's a battle of the front foot. Both fighters want to be on the front foot. Canelo learned that lesson. Canelo was on the back foot. He was back foot heavy in the first fight. He was more front foot oriented in the second fight. He made the proper adjustment. And he knows he has to be front foot oriented in this third fight. And he's going to land more shots against Golvkin naturally. And Golvkin, Canelo being more front foot oriented, will have more openings to counter and to land that jab both defensively and offensively. He'll land counter shots as well as front foot offensive oriented combinations against Canelo in this fight as well. And it's going to be fireworks. This will be fireworks. Golvkin super fans, Canelo haters have already hedged this fight. Triple G is too old now. And I see a lot of that. Just be excited about the fight. We'll get to all that in the future. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll be able to properly evaluate how this rivalry went. For now, cheer for your fighter. I don't want to see any goalposts moving. I don't want to see any leveraging, hedging. I don't want to see any of that. Be excited about your fighter. You called for this fight constantly. I wanted to see this fight. Been a fan of both fighters for years. I wanted to see the third fight. I was more excited than anybody when this fight was announced, the third fight. So what I don't want to see now is the Golvkin super fans who have been saying for 4 years, oh, Canelo's not going to fight us. Canelo's not going to fight us. Canelo's not going to fight us. So when Canelo turns back around and says, I'm going to fight your guy, now it's, we're too old. We're too old. No, you were calling for the fight. Before it was even at 40 years old, Golvkin would beat Canelo. Now it's, my guy loses. I can use that as an excuse, as an alibi. No. Be excited. Cheer for your fighter. You called for this fight for years. Let's get with it. Let's get to it. As Ricky Hatton always said, let's have it. Let's have it. Ronvise is a cherry pick, wrong cherry pick for Chocolatito. I can't say I agree with that. The judges count on the power jabs the whole 12 rounds on the second fight. Keep safe. It easy. God bless. Peace, y'all. Canelo has to take Golvkin out. If he doesn't, it would look bad. No, a 40-year-old should be competitive with prime Canelo. And I disagree with that because I think I think Golvkin looked better and looked good in Murata fight. I think he looked better than people are making it out to be. So we'll see. We're going to find out, but I don't want to see any hedging. I don't want to see any waffling out there. This is the fight that everybody wanted to see. And it's the biggest fight of the year. There is buzz. And I can tell you that because I'm looking at the prices for hotels, for flights, for the fight. And I can tell you they're astronomical, which tells us that there's buzz for this fight, that this is a big fight. And it's likely going to go down as the biggest fight of the year. So that's what we're looking at. Glad you're going to see it live, Calix. Will be a good fight to have it historically. Getting to see two legends at the same time in an epic rivalry finale. Appreciate that, Chicano. Appreciate that super chat. And we're going to be talking about this a lot this week because I'm through the roof for this fight. These are two legends. And I wanted to be at this card because I want to see two legends, especially Golvkin before it's too late. I've never seen him live. I've always wanted to see Canelo fight. Saw him Canelo versus Mayweather, but that wasn't the best Canelo, obviously. I want to see Canelo fight right now, and then I want to see a future legend in Bam Rodriguez fight on the undercard. That's why I had to be there. I had to be there, and I'm going to support these fighters. And my final message to you would be, give these fighters their flowers. Give them the flowers they deserve while they're fighting. Don't wait till they're retired. Don't wait till 5 years after they're retired and say, you know, I hated that guy at the time, but I got to go back and respect them. Give them the respect they deserve now, because if you do, other fighters are going to see this. Other fighters who are fighting once a year against average opposition and say, I want those flowers too. In order to get those flowers, I got to go through that. I got to go through that fire. When you give the proper fighters their flowers, give them their credit at the right time, it's going to show other fighters that I got to behave that way as well if I want those flowers. But if you're giving flowers, if you're giving credit to fighters who aren't going through that fire, fighting inactively, fighting inconsistently, not fighting top competition, then it shows to other fighters, it signals to them that I don't have to do the things that Canelo and Golvkin are doing. I don't have to do those things. I could get my flowers otherwise. So give Canelo and Golvkin their just due as fighters. I'm out. See y'all tomorrow. I want to get to this super chat. I just saw this super chat come through from my guy Chauncey Pearls. Sorry about that, Chauncey. I was finishing up. Let me get this mic back up. I saw GGG Jacobs at MSG Live, which was a bucket list for me to watch a championship fight at MSG. This is a good call going live to see two legends, and it is. And the thing about that fight, too, is that's another one that the anti-Golvkin people point to and say, Golvkin lost that fight, Golvkin lost that fight. But if you put things into proper perspective at the time, and this is why I don't understand this analysis, this revisionist history that Golvkin didn't fight this guy, he didn't fight anybody, he didn't fight anybody. Golvkin has several top 10 wins on his resume. And Danny Jacobs, for whatever reason, that's a victory that people look past all the time. It's a victory that people look at and they just try to gloss over now. Danny Jacobs was seen, if there's a guy at 160, it wasn't seen as Canelo at the time. If there's a guy at 160 that's going to beat Gennady Golovkin, it's Danny Jacobs. And Gennady Golovkin beat Danny Jacobs. Whether you agree with the scorecards or not, he beat Danny Jacobs. And I thought it was a fair decision. I thought he won a close fight. He won the fight. He won the fight. And Danny Jacobs was seen as either 1, 2, or 3 in the division at the time. And he beat him. He beat him. And he fought the other guy who was seen at 1, 2, or 3 at the time twice, in Canelo Alvarez. And he arguably beat him in those fights. On that note, see y'all tomorrow.